इतना नाटक just to have one wine, देखो मुझे तो समझ नहीं आता. But what I do understand is how the wine business or how the alcohol business works. Today, we're going to analyze Sula Vineyards. It just made its debut on the stock market and the stock price didn't really reflect any growth. In fact, it fell. Let's understand why. So before we talk about the financials and growth prospects, if any, about Sula Vineyards, let's talk about the story itself. I think the story is interesting. The founder who had the vision to build all of this, right? Remember, you don't have local producers or Indian producers of wine that much. And all of this happened because of this guy, Rajiv Samant. Rajiv Samant was already a rich guy. He studied at Stanford. He came back to India. He loved drinking and was a bartender at parties. He also met someone interesting. His friend was Kerry. He loved wine. I mean, he was a wine connoisseur of sorts. And he also became the chief winemaker, there's a word for it, at Sula Wines. Now, like most of us, Rajiv did a tech job and hated his job and realized, yaar, mujhe karna kya hai life mein? There was no job satisfaction. Although he was in the US and probably earning decent coin, he decided to come back to Mumbai and said,
Papa,
Yes.
I have an idea. I think I should join our business.
तेरा तो यूएस में टेक जॉब था ना, उसका क्या हुआ?
वो हो गया.
Okay.
But I think I should join you.
See, do one thing. Start your own business. Prove yourself, then I'll see what we can do.
Okay?
Chalo, that did not go well, but dads to aise hi hota hai. Anyway, Rajiv then tried multiple things and either he did not find satisfaction or didn't really see any progress or growth. So at one point, his dad came and said, Beta, here is 20 acres of land. Do whatever with it that you can, you decide. And that's when Rajiv stumbled upon the idea to actually turn that piece of land into this. Well, before that, he had to actually grow grapes on it. He figured out कि नाशिक में the temperature, the climate, the soil is sort of suited for the best kind of grapes that he envisioned that would make this wine. Now, I know this doesn't sound crazy, but back then there was no other winemaker in the country, and you've got to give him a hat tip for actually thinking and trying this. It was a bold vision. And just like all entrepreneurs, he knew where to go, what to build, but had no idea how he would get there. So he thought, I have no idea how to make wine, but my friend Kerry loves it. Let me talk to him. So Kerry came to India. They actually grew some grapes and turned it into wine. And I guess when they actually sipped it, they thought, ooh la la, this is so nice. Let's turn this into a company. And that's how Sula was born. The word Sula actually comes from Samant's mother's name, Sulbha, which he's actually shortened to Sula. Now, this is a beautiful story, very interesting. But now we're going to talk about the growth prospects, why Sula can grow, if it can, and the financials. But before I do that, in the comments type, tell me, do you like white wine, red wine, or you drink something else completely different? I'd love to know what these viewers are actually drinking. Anyway, let's start with the financials. First thing I'm going to go, Sula has 52% market share in the country. That's pretty good, right? Because it already owns the category. It's clearly a leader, something that investors love because they want to invest in leaders. But we'll get into the details a little bit. Another good thing is the distribution. Remember, like most things, alcohol is not D2C, which means you can't go online, order it and get it delivered at home like any other product, right? Distribution is a very difficult thing to achieve. Think about Pepsi, for example. You can see it gaon mein, city mein, chahe it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, you will find Pepsi or a Coke or one of these FMCG products everywhere. That distribution, right from manufacturing to get to the last mile, that is very, very tough to achieve. One good thing about Sula is that Sula is available in all states across the country. And of course, that's a very nice moat because that's not easily replicable. Distribution is something that over here is very good, right? It's in all states. But let's have a closer look at their financials. And I'm going to start with their P&L. First, let's start with sales. Basic thing hai, when you're investing in a company, there must be growth. Bahar se jitna chamkila ho, jitna acha ads ho, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters that you're really paying for is growth. You want to buy a Google in the 90s and still own it in 2023 and beyond. So growth, the G factor, is really important for IPO'd companies, for public companies. Very, very important. So let's look at sales from that perspective. So if you see here, you can see 2018 we were at 400 crores. And then you fast forward to 2021. It's not really grown. So this is the first red flag. Growth over here is not obvious. Now, why I've not taken 2022? Because that's one positive. 2022 overall has been one of the best years for Sula. But I also suspect that's why they're IPOing. They IPO when something goes really well. But anyway, let's continue. So there is no growth in sales. Look at the expense. It's sort of the same. Overall, you can see that their operating profit margin has been between 14 and 19%. Okay? In 2022, it's 27%, which is a big hike. But let me show you something more interesting. If you come down here to EPS, EPS is the best way to understand earnings of a company versus each share, right? As a shareholder, you'll own X number of shares. You want that each share ka value to be going up in terms of earnings of the company, right? I'm not talking about price, earnings of the company. Ye growth hona chahiye. Best way to see it is in EPS. So if you look at EPS, just look at this and tell me, do you think the EPS is growing? Is it going from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6? But there should be growth. You'll see it goes from 12 to 13, okay, not bad. Then minus 5, then minus 0.42, then plus 6.2. It generally, for an investor, it's not a good thing, right? An investor thinking to buy a company for the long term, and especially people like us, right? Who don't know the management, don't know कि कुछ extraordinary होने वाला है. We're diversifying our portfolios with many different companies. This is generally not seen as a good thing unless you have some insider knowledge, which none of us do. So this EPS growth is not good. So two things from profit and loss. One, sales growth, EPS growth नहीं है. Second, 22 in isolation is a very good year. But I think 1 year is not enough to prove that the next 10 years will be good. But koi nahi, let's not be so hard on this company. Let's see the balance sheet. So a balance sheet dekhte hain. Basically what we saw in profit and loss will be reflected here, right? So you see that the reserves, actually let's not look at reserves. Let's look at borrowings, okay? Which is debt. So borrowings jo hai, it's at 220, 275, 300, 300, 226. It is stable. This is a good thing. You don't want a lot of debt to be fueling growth. जो है नहीं वैसे यहाँ पे, but अगर होता, you don't want too much of debt to be fueling it because everyone can't pull a Reliance, right? Reliance, for example, was taking a lot of debt for a very long time, but at one point they basically did dilution and that debt went away. That's not normal. I mean, that's like a superhero move. It's rare. Generally, you don't want to see debt going up too fast along with growth. So here, he's able to maintain borrowings, which is actually a good thing. They're very strict in how much liability they have. So this is a very good positive. You'll notice reserves. Reserves, think of it like a bank balance, right, of a company. Liquid assets. So you can see that that's 300 crores and it stays to 300 crores right till 2021. In 2022, it becomes close to 400 crores, but it's an outlier year. So because the reserves aren't growing, that's why EPS is also not growing. So that's not a good thing, right? They're not able to generate cash. And they go, think about it, right? Like a Sula is making something like a 10 crores profit a year. That's not a lot, right? As a business, huge respect for the vision, for what he's changed, etc. But for the G factor, right? The growth factor that's required in public markets, the growth isn't there yet. So maybe it's very, very early for wine to be mainstream in the country. And I also want to know, do you think wine can become as mainstream as coffee is in America? India में क्या mainstream है? Chai है, whiskey है, spirits हैं, right? Do you think wine can become mainstream culture in India? Type it in the comments. What do you think is the mainstream culture in India for the next 20 years in terms of drinking? So I don't think coffee हो सकता है. I think chai है. I don't think wine शायद नहीं हो सकता. I think spirits है. So what do you think is over there? Like in Japan, for example, in Germany, it's beer. Now I can't turn Germany into a wine drinking country. But Europe, for example, is wine drinking. So is drinking cultural? ये भी please comments में डाल. I'd love to know what you think so we can learn from each other as well. Anyway, let's continue with what we have over here. Now let's look at the shareholding pattern. This is very interesting. So instead of just looking at numbers, let's understand psychology थोड़ा सा, ठीक है? So first thing you see over here is promoters owns 27%. These are owners and operators of the business, right? That's what promoters mean. then you can see FIs and DIs are 7% each. Or sorry, 7.5%, 8% each, which is actually low. You want higher institutional sponsorship. Take a look at, say, Colgate, right? The institutional sponsorship in Colgate is much higher than anything else. This is something that generally gives you a vibe that are intelligent, professional, institutionalized investors trusting the business over the long term, or is the public? Generally, it's thought that जहाँ पे ज़्यादा public holding है, smart money is not being followed. Generally, this is a principle you can follow. And you can see over here that public owns 57%. Now, what's interesting and worse than this is that 32% of the ownership of non-promoters, so those were investors during the private time of Sula, actually offloaded all of that to the public. And not a single rupee from the IPO. So, as you know, when an IPO is done, money is raised, given to the company to actually fuel further growth, thereby making more money for the shareholder. So, isme, all this money that was raised, not a single rupee has gone to Sula. Now, in many cases, this is fine, but in this case, Sula already did not have growth. So, if they did have an X factor they wanted to bring in, capital to chahiye hoga. Why hasn't any money gone to the company for the growth to make public more money? I find that a bit odd. So over here, basically what we can see is that all the IPO proceeds has gone as an exit or a secondary sale, well, a sale to existing shareholders, and not a single rupee has gone to the company. This is generally not a good thing. Another interesting thing is this. It's called Port 1000. It's port wine made by the same promoters of Sula. What's interesting is that it's a very high margin business कि जो बचा कुचा grapes होता है, the leftover grapes to actually make Sula wine is used to make Port 1000. They put sugar, they put water, and over a period of time it ferments and Port 1000 is born. It's a very high margin business because the cost of the raw material is very low and the production is very low, right? This makes about 10 to 20 crores profit every year. But there's something interesting is that this is a separate company. So investors in Sula don't get a share in this company's profits or growth. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I just thought it's interesting that they also own a different company, which makes a different kind of wine. Now, when mostly the alcoholic beverages industry does advertisements, they do surrogate marketing because daru ko to you cannot advertise, but you can advertise Hayward's soda.
Hayward's 5000 soda.
Yaro ka tashan.
And because of that, people understand Hayward's, Tuborg, or even Kingfisher, right? The ooh la 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 la, that one. That was interesting. But Sula ka ad हमको कभी नहीं दिखता किसी के भी TV पे, or I have not seen them personally. So I have an interesting task for you. Find out how Sula does their marketing. And you'll find how they do the marketing very interesting. Do a Google search and put it in the comments. The first one who gets it, he'll get a prize from us. And if you have suggestion on how they can market, put that in the comments also. I'd love to understand how can Sula create wine drinking culture in the country. I think that's what they need to, bring growth in. So put it in the comments. Now, I don't know whether you should invest in Sula or not. I just found the story amazing. I found the vision amazing. The business, I don't know if it's doing so well, but I'd love to understand what you think in the comments below. And बाकी तो ये मेरा glass खत्म हो गया. I can maybe get one more and you tell me in the comments whether you enjoyed this analysis or not.